The book, If Russia Wins, a Scenario by Carlo Masala, professor of international politics at the Bundeswehr University in Munich, who trains personnel for the German armed forces, instantly became a bestseller in Germany. This fact was highlighted by the American newspaper, The Washington Post, which notes that the scenario described in the book is quite realistic. The book instantly became a bestseller in Germany and in the Netherlands, was published in London, but has not yet been released in the United States. Its plot is a literary device that asks the question, what if Russia's victory in Ukraine is just the beginning? Explains The Washington Post. As noted in the publication, Masala's scenario begins in March 2028 when 2 Russian brigades enter Narva, Estonia's third largest city, population 57,000, located on the border with Russia. 88% of the population is Russian-speaking, and many are already armed with smuggled small arms and machine guns. Simultaneously, Russian soldiers disguised as tourists are transported by ferry to seize the Estonian island of Hiiumaa off the coast. Thus begins the attack on the 3 Baltic states, each protected by NATO membership, the newspaper emphasizes. Russian media says that one can only guess how rich the book's author has become, given the scale of the militaristic rhetoric and expectations of a Russian invasion in Europe. Meanwhile, NATO headquarters are developing realistic, not imaginary, scenarios for Russia's seizure of the Kaliningrad region. Western military analysts and high-ranking NATO officers openly state that the Baltics will become the arena of confrontation between Russia and NATO. They emphasize, however, that the West has no intention of waiting for a Russian attack and that the plans developed are preemptive in nature. In this case, according to European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, Europe has to confront the reality of the hybrid warfare being waged against it. Recent drone and airspace incursions, cyber attacks, and election interference were just a few incidents that von der Leyen cited as instances of hybrid warfare against Europe. In just the past 2 weeks, MiG fighters have violated Estonia's airspace, and drones have flown over critical sites in Belgium, Poland, Romania, Denmark, and Germany. Flights have been grounded, jets scrambled, and countermeasures deployed to ensure the safety of our citizens. Von der Leyen said during a speech to the European Parliament in Strasbourg, France, "Make no mistake, this is part of a worrying pattern of growing threats. Across our union, undersea cables have been cut, airports and logistics hubs paralyzed by cyber attacks, and elections targeted by malign influence campaigns," von der Leyen said, adding empathetically, "This is hybrid warfare, and we have to take it very seriously." Moscow has long been accused of being behind a multitude of hybrid attacks against its European neighbors, but has repeatedly denied these accusations. European countries on the periphery of the EU or those on the frontier with Russia, like the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, or those in Eastern Europe, such as Romania and Poland, have been increasingly exposed to hybrid warfare attacks. These incidents have ranged from energy and telecommunications infrastructure, such as undersea cables being sabotaged, to Russian jets or submarines venturing into NATO airspace or waters for short periods of time.
Pope Leo XIV encouraged international news agencies on Thursday to stand firm as a bulwark against the ancient art of lying and manipulation, as he strongly backed a free, independent, and objective press. According to Associated Press, history's first American pope called for imprisoned journalists to be released and said the work of journalists must never be considered a crime, but rather a right and duty that must be protected and defended. "If today we know what is happening in Gaza, Ukraine, and every other land bloodied by bombs, we largely owe it to them," Leo said of journalists. These extraordinary eyewitness accounts are the culmination of the daily efforts of countless people who work to ensure that information is not manipulated for ends that are contrary to truth and human dignity. Leo's comments came in a speech to executives of international news agencies belonging to Minds International, a consortium of leading agencies including the Associated Press. In his 5 months as Pope, the Chicago-born Pope has spoken out strongly of the need to protect the freedom of expression and the rights of journalists. In his first meeting with reporters right after the conclave, Leo called for the release of imprisoned journalists and affirmed the precious gift of free speech and the press. More recently, he affirmed that journalism was not only an act of justice, but a duty of all those who long for a solid and participatory democracy. In a letter to a crusading Peruvian journalist repeatedly sued for her work, Leo affirmed the freedom of the press was an inalienable common good. On Thursday, he strongly encouraged news agencies while acknowledging the crisis they are facing, with economic pressures and consumers increasingly unable to distinguish fact from fiction, truth from lies. "I urge you, never sell out your authority," Leo said. Leo said even with the challenges posed by artificial intelligences, news agencies must stand firm. With your patient and rigorous work, you can act as a barrier against those who, through the ancient art of lying, seek to create divisions in order to rule by dividing. You can also be a bulwark of civility against the quicksand of approximation and post-truth, he said.
Ogni giorno ci sono reporter che rischiano personalmente perché la gente possa sapere come stanno le cose. E in un tempo come il nostro, di conflitti violenti e diffusi, quelli che cadono sul campo sono molti, vittime della guerra e dell'ideologia della guerra, che vorrebbe impedire ai giornalisti di esserci. Non dobbiamo dimenticarli. Se oggi sappiamo che cosa è successo a Gaza, in Ucraina e in ogni altra terra insanguinata dalle bombe, lo dobbiamo in buona parte a loro. Grazie. Il Signore sia con voi.
Pope Leo has strongly encouraged international news agencies to stand as a bulwark against what he called the ancient art of lying and manipulation. He strongly affirmed the need for a free, independent, and objective news media, this during a meeting with news executives from the Minds International, a consortium of international news agencies meeting in Rome. Leo called again for the release of imprisoned journalists, said journalism can never be considered a crime, but rather a right that must be protected and defended. He acknowledged the twin crises that are hitting the news industry at the moment, threatening economic sustainability of news organizations, but also the crisis of information, where consumers increasingly are unable to distinguish fact from fiction. Leo urged the news agencies, do not ever sell out your authority.